Chapter 8. Help by the British. We spent 2 nights in Miss Tobin's house. Then we went to Ned McGrath's of Tincurry, and from there we were taken by Ned to Gorman's of Burncourt Castle. We then arranged to go to Ryan's of Tubrid, and sent on word that they might expect us. But after sending word we changed our minds and did not go to Tubrid. And lucky it was for us, or for somebody else. Just at the time we had expected to be there, the house was surrounded by 8 peelers, and Ryan himself was arrested. We decided to go to Mitchelstown in County Cork, at the other end of the Galties. We spent the night in O'Brien's of Bala, and while we were there, a strange thing occurred. We were sleeping upstairs when strange voices aroused us. We looked out and saw several peelers just entering the house. We at once got ready for a fight, expecting to see them mounting the stairs at any moment. But they never came. In a few minutes, they took their departure. Then we learned that the object of their visit was to ascertain if the owner of the house had paid the licence for his dogs. Finally, we reached Mitchelstown, where we met Christy Ryan, who welcomed us and gave us shelter of his house. While we were there, we saw 8 armed policemen pass the door. They were guarding a little packet of blasting powder. Evidently, the Solo Head Beg affair had taught them to take no chances, and now they had quadrupled the escort. Later, we came across into East Limerick, where Ned O'Brien of Galbally put us up, and then we travelled farther to the Maloney's of Loch Ellie, the scene of a great battle with the British 2 years later. At Loch Ellie, we stayed about a week. But you must understand our position all this time since the affair at Solo Head Beg. We were still within a radius of 10 miles of the scene. Police and military were scouring the countryside for us, searching houses, ditches, and woods. The clergy, the public, and the press had all condemned our action. Our only consoling thought was that so were the men of '98 and the Fenians of '67, and then the men of 1916, condemned in their day. And we knew that, as the cause of these men had been vindicated, so too would our cause, when the scales fell from the people's eyes. At this time, however, scarce a word would be heard in our defence. Our point of view was not even to be listened to. The people had voted for a republic, but now they seemed to have abandoned us who tried to bring that republic nearer, and who had taken them at their word. Our former friends shunned us. They preferred the drawing room as their battleground, and the political resolution rather than the gun as their weapon. We had heard the gospel of freedom preached to us. We believed in it. We wanted to be free, and we were prepared to give our lives as proof of the faith that was in us. But those who preached the gospel were not prepared to practice it. Even from the Irish Volunteers or the Irish Republican Army, as it now came to be known, we got no support. Ned O'Brien and James Scanlon of Galbally, Paddy Ryan of Doon, and Davy Burke of Emly certainly stood by us, but they were the exceptions. When the news of Solo Head Beg affair became public, a meeting was actually summoned in Tipperary town by a man who should have been our friend. His purpose was to disassociate Sinn Féin from the incident and to denounce us for our action. The meeting was, however, called off by another prominent man, a local clergyman, in a sermon in which he denounced us as murderers, said that it used to be the custom to say, "Where Tipperary leads, Ireland follows," but he hoped this would not be so in the case of Solo Head Beg. The men responsible for which would, he said, go to their graves with the brand of Cain on their foreheads. Such were the things said about us, but we kept on our course. In many places we were refused shelter on a night that one would not put out a dog. I remember on one occasion we were sitting in a farmhouse by the fireside when a loud knock was made at the door. It was dark, and the farmer did not care to open without knowing he was outside. "Who's there?" he demanded. "Police," came the prompt reply. Simultaneously, we drew our revolvers. The door was opened, and a young neighbouring farmer entered, laughing heartily at his attempted joke. Before we could put away our guns, the owner of the house observed him. At once his attitude towards us changed. He informed us point blank that he would not permit men with guns to stay under his roof. It was bitterly cold, but we had to go out into one of the outhouses for the night. So chilled were we that we had to drive in some of the cows to keep us warm. We had to keep tramping from parish to parish, without a penny in our pockets. Our clothes and boots were almost worn out, and we had no changes. Many whom we thought we could trust would not let us sleep even in their cattle byres. When we reached the village of Dono in County Limerick, still only 7 miles from Solohead Beg, we again met with Seamus Robinson, and I hardly need say that our joy at the reunion was unbounded. Although it was only a few weeks since we parted after the fight at Solohead Beg, we all felt like brothers meeting after years of separation. When we met, we continued our night's march linked arm in arm. While we were in this neighbourhood, Paddy Ryan, a well-known local merchant and an old worker in the cause of freedom, proved a staunch friend to us. With Seamus again one of our band, we discussed the outlook and the chances of winning over the people to engage in one good stand-up fight against the old enemy. We then drafted a proclamation ordering all the enemy forces out of South Tipperary. We sent it on to Dublin, but both An Dáil and General Headquarters refused their consent to let us go ahead. We never found out their reason for doing so. Ours was the only logical position. Withholding their support was a bad blow enough, but what was our horror when we found that someone had actually worked up a plan to ship us away to America. We were not consulted at all, but calmly told to be ready to sail in a couple of days. It was surely a sugar-coated pill, a deportation order in disguise, issued from the very source that should, if consistent, get behind us in the war. We refused to leave Ireland. We told them that we were not afraid to die, but would prefer to live for Ireland. To leave Ireland would be like an admission that we were criminals or that we were cowards. Now, more than ever, we declared that our place was in Ireland, and Ireland's fight would have to be made by Irishmen on the hills and at the crossroads in Ireland, not with the printer's ink in America or in any other country. This was apparently regarded as a breach of discipline. We were members of an organised body and should obey our superior officers. They persisted in their plan of sending us away, and we, just as obstinately, refused to leave. At length we won, but only on condition that we should remain away in some remote part of the country. We felt that we could very soon overcome that difficulty too. While these little quibbles were going on between GHQ and ourselves, we were suffering intensely. The cold weather and the weary, aimless travelling around were very trying on us. We could not get a horse to carry us even a journey of a few miles. We had to trudge from field to field, sometimes in one direction, sometimes in another. At last, human nature began to assert itself. Why should we be treated so? Was not the sky as fair in one place as in another? From Doon we went to Upper Church in the north of Tipperary. There we spent a few days with Patrick Kinane, one of a family of famous Irish athletes. Our next resting place, we decided, would be Meahers of Anfield. We sent on word that they might expect us to arrive at 7:30 in the evening, when it would be quite dark. The four of us, accompanied by Patrick Kinane, walked along the road, chatting and enjoying the cool spring air. We must have taken our time along the way, for Tracy looked at his watch and reminded us that we were overdue, as it was now nearly 8 o'clock. Suddenly, in the distance, we saw something white fluttering in the darkness. We halted. It was a signal by a girl who was trying to attract our attention. The four of us dropped into a place of concealment behind a thick hedge. The girl saw us and approached along the road. As she passed the spot in which she had seen us hide, she whispered the words, "The peelers are inside, raiding." She was one of Miss Maher's who had slipped out unnoticed by the police to give warning, knowing the road by which we would come. From our point of vantage, we waited until we saw the forces of the British law depart to their barracks. Then we proceeded on our way and entered the house they had been raiding, where we enjoyed a pleasant tea. From Mears, we came south again to Leahy's of Boherlahan, the famous family of Tipperary hurlers. After that, we went to Donnelly's of Nodstown in the same district, where we held a meeting of our brigade council on a Sunday evening. With our colleagues, we discussed plans for more active operations and produced the proclamation we had drawn up ordering all British armed forces to leave South Tipperary under penalty of death. Although headquarters had refused their sanction, we decided to publish it. Around the end of February, it was posted up in several parts of the county. The newspapers published it with mocking headlines. It seemed a tall order, no doubt, at the time, but subsequent events showed that we saw further ahead than either the newspapers or our own headquarters gave us credit for. After that meeting, we decided to turn northwards towards Creany, sending word ahead as we always did. We sent a message to Patrick Cannan to meet us with a car and started our long tramp in the dismal night. At Upper Church, we were met by Cannan, Doherty, and Patrick Dwyer, and we headed for Murphy's house at Creany. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when we reached our destination. Seldom did we suffer more than that night from cold and exposure. The weather was harsh, even for February, and the district was wild and mountainous. When we arrived at Murphy's house, we were ravenously hungry. Murphy was a great character. He was locally known as the station master. Why? I don't know, for the nearest railway station was 15 miles away from his house. He was preparing a great meal of smoked ham and eggs for us. So hungry was Hogan that instinctively and half unconsciously he began to eat the raw ham as it was put on the frying pan. In a few minutes he was seriously ill, and we thought he was going to die. He soon revived, but for weeks afterwards he was far from well. His illness at this time was very unfortunate for us, because we had made up our minds, in spite of headquarters orders, that we would try to get to Dublin, as we could no longer endure the misery of our existence. With that purpose, we went from Creanery to the Falls of the Nass, that most glorious and picturesque spot on the Shannon just across the Limerick border from North Tipperary. Then we parted with Robinson and Tracy, who started on their perilous journey to Dublin, while I remained behind with Hogan until he would be himself again. They arrived in Dublin safely and were welcomed by a few sympathetic friends. A full and accurate description of each one of us, with the reward offered for information that might lead to our capture, appeared every week in the Hue and Cry, the official police gazette, and so it was no easy thing for them to either travel to the city or to get about when they arrived there. Meantime, Hogan and I could not stay long in the district round the Keeper Mountains, but Tommy McInerney came out from Limerick with a motor car, accompanied by Tim Ryan. McInerney was the man who drove the ill-fated motor car which went to meet Roger Casement on Good Friday of 1916, when the car ran over a cliff in Kerry and two of the occupants were drowned, McInerney himself escaping. Tim Ryan knew of a friendly priest in West Limerick who would give us shelter, and we started on our journey to meet one of the truest friends we ever made, a certain Saggart whose praises I should like to sound here, but who does not wish his name to be made known. Sean Hogan sat in the front with McInerney, who was driving, Ryan and I being in the back. For a time our journey was uneventful until we approached Limerick City. We were suddenly confronted by lorry loads of soldiers dashing along in the direction of Tipperary. We knew they were on some big roundup. We did not know then, though we found out later, that they had received information that we were lying in a certain hiding place, and scores of troops with armoured cars were being rushed to the scene. Never since we left Solo Head Beg did we feel in such a tight corner. One flash of suspicion on the part of a single officer of the party would have ruined us. At that time, we knew that more than one British soldier, even privates, had fond hopes of earning the reward for our capture, and many of them had been at great pains to study our descriptions. Besides, it was comparatively easy for them in the spring of 1919, for we were then the only much wanted men, as the newspapers described us. An apparently endless line of lorries approached us, every soldier armed to the teeth, every lorry equipped with a machine gun. The smallest show of concern on our part meant our death warrant. The slightest sign of fear or anxiety would betray us, and there was no turning back. To attempt such a thing would be an open challenge by 3 men to several hundred soldiers. Coolness and bluff were our only hope. We passed the first 20 lorries without turning a hair. We just looked at the troops, and with that gaze of curiosity mingled with admiration that one might expect from any loyal citizen watching his gallant protectors go by. We had passed a greater part of the convoy and were beginning to feel more at ease, when suddenly, rounding a corner, we were confronted by a sentry with a rifle upraised and called on to "Halt!" Our driver at once put on the brakes, and pulled up. We now realised why the other braves had allowed us to pass unchallenged. We had been led into an ambush, permitted to get right into the middle of the convoy, so that we had not a dog's chance of escaping. It was a cunning trap, but we would show them how Irishmen can die rather than surrender. It was all up with us, but we would sell our lives as dearly as we could. I pulled my gun. For a fraction of a second, I fingered it fondly under the rug, rapidly deciding where I should send my bullets with best effort. I had my finger on the trigger, ready to raise my arm to fire, when an officer dashed up. "Sorry for delaying you, gentlemen," he shouted. This did not look like an ambush. I gently lowered my gun from view and waited for his next words. He was the captain in charge of the party. "Two of the beastly cars, have broken down," he explained, "and 'twas awfully unfortunate, don't you know, but the traffic was almost completely blocked." He apologised profusely for the delay, but he feared there was not enough room for our car to pass. 'Twas jolly rotten, but he thought we should have to get out and walk. By this time I had quite recovered my composure. I told him politely but firmly that we had an important business appointment to keep, and that any further delay might mean serious loss to us. Besides, I said, we had travelled far, and a long motor journey was not good for rheumatics, and we were far too tired to walk. I think he was really impressed by my protest. At stage, British officers regarded an Irishman who could travel in a motor car as a person of importance who might get a question raised in the House if treated rudely. A year or two later, I know what he would have said to any Irishman met on the road. He suddenly turned to his men, ordered 3 or 4 of them to drop their rifles, and push us in our car for about 200 yards until we had passed the broken down lorries and could take the middle of the road again. Never did I feel more inclined to laugh. Here was a section of the British Army actually going out of its way to save us the trouble of walking, while the same army was day and night searching the countryside for us. What a pretty heading it would have been for the Morning Post. Wanted gunmen, aided and abetted by the British Army. We were more profuse in our thanks to the soldiers, assured them that they need not push our car any further, and were very sorry to have put them to so much trouble. A moment later, we waved them goodbye, and were dashing along the road to Foynes. I can assure you that the speed of our car was tested for the next quarter of an hour, in case, by any chance, the obliging soldiers might get suspicious and come after us to make inquiries. But Sean and I laughed heartily when we left them behind. It was the first time since we had become outlaws that the British helped us to escape. It was not the last, for more than once I had reason to feel grateful for their stupidity in helping me out of difficulties when they little knew who I was.